Welcome to the Blue Feathered Stories. I'm your hostess, Blue Thunderbird Woman, also known as Carol. Anyone who has been following the Blue Feathered Stories knows that mostly what I share is my healing journey, working with spirit through the whole process. Anything from observing what's been going on with the angels, to the whispers, to what's going on with my body. It has been an incredible journey. And in the last year, one of the things that I have actually been working on that for some reason never gets talked about is healing the money story. What is your money story? A lot of us have a story that needs to be healed. There is something that we have inherited, a belief system, something we feel we are fated with. There, for most of us, is something deeply connected there. And a lot of times it even will go back to an ancestral curse, an ancestral spell that has been passed on from generation to generation to generation. And so I'm really feeling called to talk about this because my money story needs to be healed once and for all. And I have been on this journey of healing this for a long time. And so for the next few episodes, I am going to bring in some beautiful soul sisters that all have a sad money story, but one that has turned into happy face money story. And so join me in the next few episodes as we explore this more deeply. I'm super excited to do this because no one talks about money. We don't talk about it. There's definitely some sort of emotion of embarrassment, shame, like what comes up. And there are some people that have amazing, beautiful money stories. It's never been an issue for them. They've never really attached any kind of emotions to it. And it is my hope that we'll be able to speak to both so we can see the spectrum of people's money story. So so stay tuned. I'm super excited to be moving into this realm because I do think that wealth, and I've said this before, W plus health is a very much big part of our health story. The money part is a part of the health story. So follow along, find out more, and let's dive in. So I'm actually going to share a little bit in this particular episode because there's lots of backstory that needs to happen when it comes to the money story. And I have quite a fascinating money story, and it starts with being a child. I remember growing up that it was encouraged to save, that you did not spend money. You saved it. And the more you saved, the greater and better that it was. So as a child, I remember clearly I had one of those quick boxes. Now, for those of you who are in your 60s or a little bit older, you may remember that your parents used to buy quick chocolate. It was a cacao powder with sugar in it, and you mixed it in your milk, or we used to mix it in our vanilla ice cream to make chocolate ice cream. And you drank that. You drank it. I used to actually take scoops of it in copious amounts and eat it, like just right out of the can. Like who needed milk? But we used to keep the cans, clean them out. My dad would cut out a little slit in the little metal lid, and then I would save pennies. I would save whatever money came my way. Early on, we were given a allowance for the work that we did as a family. So I had a specific job. My job was dusting. So anytime that I got money, I would put it in. Anytime my dad had pennies, or if I found pennies or whatever, I put it in my quick box. And eventually, my brother and my sister were older than me, and I got hired from my brother at one point to clean his room. And my payment was that if I found any change in the bed or on the floor or whatever, that was my payment. And so I used to add them to my quick box. And eventually my boxes got quite full. And when I got my first penny box filled up, my mom said it's time to open up a bank account. So we got the rollers, we rolled everything up, and I think I had about $100 worth of pennies and miscellaneous change. So I took it to the bank, and I continued that money story, which was a pretty healthy story back in the day, for quite some time. And then something happened, and I remembered that because I saved money, my brother and on occasion my sister would ask if they could borrow money from me. And being a people pleaser back in the day, how can you say no to your brother and your sister? And so I would lend them money. Eventually, most of the time that I got paid back, they were pretty honorable with it. But what I learned as a child is that you could save it, but it quickly also disappeared. And that there was actually pleasure in watching it disappear in the way in which I was helping my brother or I was helping my sister when I lent them money. I was liked. They were happy. They had a sister that was rich according to them because I always had money. So that was my early money story. Eventually, that changed, and I would say materialism came into the picture. I started working at a very young age, and I'm not talking, I'd done the babysitting thing and lots of cleaning stuff for other people, and I got paid well as a teenager. I liked to clean. And then at some point, I started working at the age of 13. I worked at an old age home, and I made good money. Compared to what the minimum wage was, I made twice as much. So I had money coming in, and I was working all the time while I was going through school. So yes, money accumulated, but then something happened. It was like I became quite the social butterfly and really got wrapped up in most of what all teenagers get wrapped up in. And it was like having the nicest outfit, the newest shoes, the nicest jacket, a good looking purse, all of those things. So then my money started to slowly, quickly disappear out of my pocket. And what I realized was that gave me short-term pleasure. Short-term pleasure. Because we know that money cannot buy happiness. However, poverty definitely doesn't give us any happiness. So in that early years of my money story earning, I learned that I had to work super hard to get what I had. And I started to accumulate materialistic things. So it was an antique desk, big price ticket items. It was a car. It was many different things. And then at some point in my money story, as I got to be a little bit older, what I realized was that when I stepped into the university world, every credit card company existed on the first week of entering university, and they all gave you free credit, $500, here you go. And credit card companies have a way of, they give you a limit and then they slowly creep it up, and your limit keeps going up and your limit keeps going up. And eventually what I did, come on, I want to go shopping, and I didn't have any money. So I took out every one of those credit cards and I maxed out those credit cards because I got immediate instant pleasure in spending on a new dress. I was into wearing leather back then, and so it was like the newest leather jacket, the newest leather pants, like you name it. Like that was my thing. I used to actually spend my student loans on leather outfits. So what I found in those early years is that my money was, I always spent more than I had. No one had ever taught me how to budget. No one had ever taught me that you should pay yourself first and put it away in, a good savings plan or whatever. Nobody taught me those things. And so by the time that I re-entered the workforce after university, my money story was that I was $17,000 in debt in student loans, and in credit card debt, I had probably about $5,000, which was a lot back in the day. And so I was starting off my work career completely in the hole. And what I recognized is that as I was comparing myself to everybody else that didn't go to university, they all had their houses, they had their cars, they had their children, they had all of those things. And I was 20 some odd $1,000 in debt in the hole. I have struggled since then continuously of trying to dig myself out of that hole. There was a few times in my story that I almost claimed bankruptcy. Never, and I still say never, meaning that it still hasn't happened for me, have I been able to get myself completely out of debt and start to create some sort of savings, some sort of way in which my money could work for me in earning interest that I could live off of. Now, I know that's the plan, and I know that's what our financial advisors tell us. But when we live in an economy where things are so expensive, then how do we change that? How do we change that money story? And I've listened to some pretty good podcasts around some really good tips around how to change that money story. But at the end of the day, you need to look at what is the story. What needs to be healed in that story? And when I look at ancestral beliefs, ancestral passings, like my grandparents were considered poor on my dad's side, and on my mom's side, they were considered not rich, but definitely had, not that they were rich in the sense of dollars, but they were rich in land. They're still not rich, and I say that with quotation marks. It still was a struggle financially in the money story. When I look at my dad's side of the family, he came from a family of 16 siblings, and one of them died shortly after birth from starvation. My grandmother just simply didn't have the milk. And so when you look at that story, and my dad talked a lot about how, sometimes all there was to eat was potatoes because they always grew a big garden and they ate from the land. And sometimes there are years there wasn't much that was coming from the garden, but they always had plenitude of potatoes and molasses. And so my dad would say, he being the oldest, there would be a bucket and there would be homemade bread and molasses poured on all of it. And the youngest would get the first piece of bread at school, the second one, third one, fourth one. And by the time he got to his piece, he had the bottom piece, and it was mush, and he hated that, but he also knew that if he didn't eat it, that it might have been the only thing he ate that day. So when I look at the ancestral lineage, there is definitely a money wounding happening in the ancestors. So there's a lot of different approaches on how we can heal our money story, right? And there's, of course, all of the tools out there on how to manifest and all of those things. But really, when you look at the global picture, there's a massive, massive, unhealthy, unbalanced money story out there. So many people live in poverty. So many people are homeless. There's, and even those who seem like they have a lot, we really do not know what's going on. If you walked into my house right now and you looked into the fridge, you would see it pretty much empty. Now, am I starving? Not at all. But am I spending money that I don't have? Absolutely. I am. I live off of credit. So I have not healed my money story yet. And I think that that's important to be transparent, is I haven't healed it, but I am healing it. And I think many of us can relate to different aspects of this story. And one person's money story in a family is maybe very different from the other sibling in the family. And so I ask you to join me in the next several episodes as I sit and have a really beautiful heart-to-heart conversation with many of my beautiful soul sisters as we talk about our money stories. And what are they? What's changed? How did that journey happen in healing it? And where are they now in the spectrum of it being healed? Are they on their way, or have they just healed another layer of it? You know, what is it? So I hope you're going to find this series absolutely amazing. I know it's going to be really, really eye-opening for many of us. And it is my hope that by having an honest conversation about the money stories, is that we can bring some healing collectively, because it's time. It's time to heal our money stories. And we're going to go deep into it, and we're going to have fun with it. And so catch me and catch us in the next several podcast stories as we share the healing journey with our money stories. Blessings.